Thank you very much, Mr. President, for your time. In the heart of World Economic Forum, Davos, Switzerland, I'm hoping that we can have a meaningful conversation with regards to leadership, your vision, and looking forward and doing a bit of backcasting and what are the things that we have to prepare, not just as Timor-Leste, but as ASEAN member as a whole. And Timor-Leste has done more than enough to qualify as ASEAN member, and we can't wait to actually welcome officially Timor-Leste as the newest member of ASEAN. But first of all, Mr. President, the best part about Timor-Leste becoming the newest member of ASEAN in a different landscape, different dynamic, and no one could foresee what's coming. And with artificial intelligence, with battle of big brothers, climate change, aging society at large, or depopulation, how do you see, as a seasoned leader, a seasoned diplomat, looking at the world today and moving forward?
Well, you said having a meaningful discussion.
Yeah.
From you, you might pose a meaningful subject. It doesn't mean necessarily that I will reciprocate with meaningful answers.
No problem at all, sir.
First, at the local and regional level, of course, ASEAN faced a very serious challenge to its centrality, its credibility, to the prestige of ASEAN. And that's a problem, almost perennial problem for Myanmar. Myanmar challenge problem is not only since the latest coup, but always from the inception of ASEAN, Myanmar has been a problem. And it is actually very unique in the world in the sense. And I know 135 countries that I visit over my lifetime. And I know most of the military regimes. I studied them in Latin America, Africa, Asia. And it's the only country in the world where the military control everything, right, including even, travel agencies, booking agencies, small restaurants, and restaurants, hotels, etc., etc. Indonesia, during the Suharto era, the military had to make money to meet their annual requirement. They had to make money by investing in hotels and airline and so on. Maybe those investments benefited some Indonesian generals, but the primary purpose was to supplement the budget. This is no longer the case. Indonesia became, they decoupled from the private sector, sold their parts, privatized or whatever, and they became far more disciplined, more professional, more apolitical. Myanmar had its army, has its hands in every pie. That is very difficult to relinquish. How? That's why they fight to the end to keep themselves in power, because that's their wealth. So ASEAN faced, the region faced this problem. And we are just very fortunate that the Myanmar problem has not spilled over into a full-fledged civil war, assuming the military collapse.
Right.
Collapse because of the lack of credibility of the leadership of the army. What could happen? Tens of thousands of the military personnel just flee, they join organized crime, they form into warlords, and they join some of the ethnic armies. Already happening. Figures I have, and these figures are credible, at least 20,000 military personnel, including senior officers, have defected. Most of them have gone to the ethnic armies of NUG. But, so I keep telling interlocutors, I told Papa Francisco in Rome, I had a long conversation with him, President Macron in France, the British, the Australians, the UN. We have to try to do everything possible to prevent the conflict from spilling over into a full-fledged civil war with tremendous greater impact on the civilian population and on the neighbors. ASEAN faced this challenge, and it doesn't seem to be a solution in sight. In my own country, we are fortunate that we are at peace. We have zero political violence, zero religious or ethnic tension. We don't have organized crime. So we will join ASEAN, contributing to ASEAN as in peace, that we are not a problem. And our priority is to keep the peace in the country so that we do not add to the existing challenges. But then in Southeast Asia, ASEAN has to walk a very sensitive issue, the South China Sea. I don't even mention the U.S.-China relationship, the U.S.-China rivalry, because that maybe it will be pacified. I'm very pleased with the statement by Donald Trump in regard to China. When I wrote to Donald Trump congratulating him for his victory, one issue I said, please reset relationship with China. China is not an enemy. The problem with the Western countries, Europeans, not all Europeans, but some, problem with people in Washington, maybe Donald Trump thinks differently. They look for enemies where there is none. They made China into an enemy. Well, it is not. Anyone who knows China knows that is not the case. China needs a very peaceful neighborhood. China needs a very peaceful wall. Because if that not happen, if China get embroiled in some regional conflict, it will destabilize China itself, destabilize its economy. How it's going to create employment for the 20+ million Chinese who every year join the job market.
Yeah, it's interesting, Mr. President. Looking from the lens that we are an ASEAN region, the most peaceful and stable region in the world, and we are set to be the 4th largest economy in the world as well. And this is the best part. I think everyone seems to be so anxious about Donald Trump, and I try to be cautiously optimistic with regards to his leadership. I will come back to you with how we define leadership, but dealing with a businessman is all about bottom line, isn't that the case?
Yeah.
And this is easy, isn't it?
Yeah. I also, like you say, I also try to be cautiously optimistic. Donald Trump is a businessman, also super smart politician. He understands at least half of the American society well, better than the Democrats. And look at what Biden, I knew President Biden when he was senator. He was very supportive of Timor-Leste. I knew his son, Bo, who died. I didn't know that well. One evening I had dinner with Biden and his son, the Pope. Biden was a very religious person, liberal, but God, look at what he did with Gaza, with Israel. In the midst of the carpet bombing of Gaza, in the midst of the destruction of hospitals, universities, killing of aid workers, what Biden does, and Blinken, always trying to justify away what Israel is doing, supplied billions of dollars more to Israel in weapons and financial assistance. So for me, goodbye, Mr. Biden. What a disappointment he has been. He, instead of toning down the rhetoric against China, under him things got worse, and got worse with Cuba, a country that is harmless to the rest of the world, suffered draconian sanctions from the US. So, let's give a chance to Donald Trump, benefit of the doubt. His first pronouncement seemed to be quite reasonable in regard Palestinian question, in regard Ukraine, and in regard China. So I might be thoroughly disappointed. We might all be disappointed, but who knows? And very important, his relationship with Modi of India, because we often the international community tend to ignore India. Well, India, young population, 1.5 billion, pool of scientists, brilliant, highly educated people. India is going to be a superpower.
In the world of TikTok, skip culture, in the world of technology, social media, artificial intelligence, somehow, or rather, has defined leadership. And how do you define leadership in this current landscape?
Well, for me, the virtues, the qualities of a true great leader is obviously, it is indisputable to say that a leader has to be super bright, highly educated, highly trained for the issues of the 21st century, for the challenge of the 21st century, for the possibility of the 21st century. However, that leader, who I say has to be highly educated, brilliant, has to be also a very humble person. Someone who is reachable, someone who is connected with the people, and someone who is compassionate. The combination of brilliance with humility and compassion, for me, is an absolute necessity in the 21st century of so many crises. And when you look at the root causes of the crisis, is anger, disappointment with the existing political elite in many countries. And the problem is, in the US or in Europe, demagogy, populism takes over, because democracy doesn't seem to deliver on the expectation of the people. So people jump to Donald Trump easy promises, simple solutions. In Europe, the same. But eventually, the populists, those who make promises, offer easy solutions, they will fail, because the problems are complex and you cannot resolve. Because this simplicity, this demagogy was tested before by Mussolini, by Hitler, and it has been tested before. Extreme left, right. Promise workers' paradise, and extreme right tested before, and also promise all solutions to the problems of the democratic elites.
Yeah, it's interesting, Mr. President, because it reminds me of the strategy of humility by Konrad Adenauer, post-Hitler, and looking at the demand, the challenging demand from the public. 9 out of 10 of my friends love to hear a leader would say, I don't know. I need to work with my team. I'll provide the solution later on. What do you think of that?
Yeah, I agree. We, as people, as human beings, as leaders, as academics, as politicians, we might not know everything. Yeah. And I'm someone who enjoy people. I'm happy to talk to a fisherman. I've done that many times. A villager, just to have some fish with him, with his family. I've done that again and again in my country. Right. A beer, I invite everybody in that simple warung yeah. in Delhi, or to some very bright children. And I know some. And it is very important to listen to them, because sometimes you can scream, Eureka, God, this teenager has just come up with a solution to this problem. But the world has become more challenging, more complex, dangerous with TikTok, with Facebook, with social media. Problems in Myanmar, like problems in World War II, that led to World War II, problems in the Balkans, because the manipulation of people, of their ignorance, or their difficult economic situation, has resulted in World War III, World War II, yeah. Hitler, Mussolini, blamed the Jews, for instance, in Europe. In East Africa, what happened? When there are economic problems, what do you do? What they did, the dictators, blame the Indians. Idi Amin, overnight, kick out tens of thousands, hundreds of thousands of Indians. In West Africa, usually you blame the Lebanese. And this going on for generations, compounded, exacerbated by today's easy access to anyone, an individual can create events, tumultuous events, by irresponsible manipulation, right. By lies. And the problem in Myanmar against the Rohingya was largely caused by the military with 800 fake Facebook accounts. The Myanmar military had a whole team working on Facebook, social media, to poison the mind of the people against the Rohingya. So much more difficult, even if we have a great leader fitting all the criteria I mentioned. And if we cannot really also, those leaders use the same tools, TikTok and so on, to reach out to the youth, to the people, to counter, right. Or create legislation, technology to make it more difficult. Anyway, that I don't have really knowledge, expertise, and or easy answers to the question you raised. Well, I remain always optimistic. For instance, when I look at the Gaza situation, I used to be a friend of Israel, as I'm always a friend of the Palestinians. But today I'm so angry with Israel. And what they have done to the Palestinians, women and children, is abominable. Yes, Hamas provoked a situation, October 7, but it was not out of the blue. A reaction to decades of betrayal of the Palestinians. Betrayal by international community, by Israel, and in the perception of Hamas and many Palestinians, betrayal by the PLO, the Palestinian Authority. And when some Arab countries signed that the bogus agreement, the Abrahamic agreement, well, it was viewed as an attempt at putting the last nail in the coffin of the Palestinian cause. But I'm able to differentiate between Netanyahu, Israeli fascism, and the Jews. Because when you look at who had been demonstrating by the hundreds of thousands in the US, in Europe, against Israel brutalities, in favor of Palestinians, well, a lot of them are Jewish.
Right.
A lot of them are rabbis.
Yes.
So, and so many young people of different, you look at them, their faces, different skin colors in London, around Europe, in the US, very mixed. Muslims who might be there, living there, students, and that is a fantastic development. The people in the US, the people in Europe, are responding better than their respective governments. Well, they are teaching a lesson of morality, of decency to their governments.
Okay, what would be your message? Because I understand your point, in order to strengthen humanity, looking from multiple layers, what would be your message to leaders around the world with regards to strengthen human fraternity, for instance?
The attitude of President Biden, his administration, US Congress, and the vast majority of European leaders, some notable exceptions, Republic of Ireland, Norway, and Spain. They took a courageous stance, bluntly supporting Palestinians, support the state of Palestine, and so on. But the rest of Europe and the United States, they allowed themselves to be dragged down into the mud, into the gutter, the moral gutter, by Netanyahu. Today, Europeans have next to zero credibility to lecture anyone else in the world about human rights. Can you imagine the European Union issuing a statement on, I don't know, some human rights situation in Asia, in Africa and Latin America? Can you imagine what the credibility of a US Congress to impose sanctions on Cuba? After everything that we have seen, their attitude towards Palestine. So they allow themselves to be dragged down to the moral gutter, moral mud, and that is dangerous because we all lose credibility, lose faith in the international institutions, lose faith in the UN, lose faith in international security arrangements. And when people lose faith, in a government, the government is in trouble. And when people lose faith in the UN is in trouble. So, absolutely urgent a reform of the United Nations. And I'm not naive. I know the UN, international politics inside out. A reform of the UN, but expanding membership of Security Council, expanding the permanent members.
But we've been talking about that for ages.
Exactly,
Mr. President.
exactly, for ages. Even if we succeed in democratizing, so meaning what? Expand the numbers of Security Council, the number of members, expand the numbers of permanent members to reflect existing demographics. Make no sense that Indonesia, almost 300 million people, that India, 1.5 billion, are not permanent members of the Security Council, while aging European countries, that barely can walk, they walk on wheelchairs, they move on wheelchairs, are permanent members of the Security Council, and a young superpower like India, Indonesia, both democracies are not members of the Permanent Members of the Security Council. But would this in itself, expanding the membership to better reflect current demographics, would resolve the problems of double standards, hypocrisy? No, not necessarily. But if we have popular movements around the world, as is happening now, who are not tired out, because sometimes people get tired. The masses get tired. How long can you sustain demonstrations? How long can you keep putting pressure on the elites in the parliament, in the government, to change policies? So there are no easy answers. The only consolation is sooner or later there will be changes. Soviet Union imploded. The Berlin Wall collapsed. Apartheid ended. We all believed that one day apartheid would end, and it did end. Right. But it took forever. The message is, do not give up, persist, fight on, do not lose hope. Hope is your only weapon. If you lose hope, if you give up, you accept defeat.
Indeed, Mr. President, thank you very much.
Thank you.
Well, that's really nice, and I think we do hope for the best. And of course, thank you for your time. And that's all. How I wish we have more time, indeed, more than 30 minutes. You remind me a lot of my late grandfather. Thank you very much, Mr. President. Can I give you a hug?
Yes, sure.
Thank you very much, sir.